The beast had killed 7 handlers before her. Nethris, the shadow wolf. A creature so ancient, so savage, that even the Alpha King himself could not command it. It had torn through chains, shattered cages, and left a trail of blood across the kingdom of Valdren. No whip could break it. No magic could bind it. Every wolf in the realm cowered at its presence, and every alpha who tried to dominate it met the same fate: death. So when Ziva stumbled into the mud-soaked courtyard, her wrists still raw from rope burns and her clothes torn from 3 days of travel in a slaver's cart, she did not expect to die like this. Not mauled by a legendary beast while nobles watched from the safety of stone balconies. But Nethris was already charging. The wolf was massive, larger than a horse, while its fur black as void and its eyes burning with ancient fury. The ground shook with every stride. Courtiers screamed. Guards raised spears they knew would be useless. And Ziva did the only thing she could. She knelt. She pressed her palms into the cold mud, closed her eyes, and reached out with the gift that had destroyed her life. The gift her father called a curse. The gift that had gotten her mother killed and her own name erased from every family record. She reached for the beast's broken soul. And Nethris stopped. The wolf's snarl faded, its massive head lowered, and then, before the eyes of every noble in Valdren, the beast that had never bowed to anyone pressed its enormous muzzle against her muddy hands. Above, on the highest balcony, Alpha King Castor watched in stunned silence. He did not know who this woman was. He did not know what she had done. He knew only one thing with absolute certainty. He would have her. But the terms he offered would be cold, calculated, and transactional. He needed a beast keeper, not a wife. He needed control of Nethris, not love. "I will never love you," he would tell her. "Please understand that." Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be. The slaver's cart smelled of iron and despair. Ziva had stopped counting the days somewhere around the 3rd sunrise, when the roads turned from packed dirt to endless mud. Her wrists had gone numb hours ago, the coarse rope cutting into skin already raw from struggling. The other women in the cart had stopped crying by now. They sat in hollow silence, their eyes fixed on nothing, their futures already written in chains. But Ziva was not like the others. She was not here because she was poor, or orphaned, or widowed without protection. She was here because her own father had sold her. Beast touched, he had called her, his voice dripping with disgust. Unnatural. A stain on this bloodline. The memory cut deeper than the ropes. Her mother had possessed the same gift, the ability to reach into the minds of wild creatures, to feel their pain, their rage, their loneliness. It was rare magic, older than the wolf kingdoms themselves, and it had gotten her mother burned alive. Ziva had been 7 years old when she watched the flames take her. After that, she had learned to hide. For 15 years, she had buried her gift so deep that even she sometimes forgot it existed. She had smiled through her father's cruelty. She had endured her sister Ceres's jealousy. She had accepted that she would never be loved, never be wanted, never be anything more than a burden to be tolerated. And then, 3 months ago, everything had shattered. A stable fire, horses screaming, and Ziva, without thinking, had reached out with her mind and calmed every animal in the burning barn. She had saved 12 horses, 3 stable hands, and her father's prized breeding stallion. She had also exposed herself. "Witch," her father had whispered, his face pale with fury. "Just like your mother." The next morning he sold her to the slavers. Now the cart lurched to a stop, and Ziva heard voices outside. Male voices sharp with authority. The canvas flap was thrown back, and blinding sunlight poured in. "Out!" a guard barked. "All of you, the king's inspection." Ziva's blood ran cold, and she had heard rumors during the journey. The Alpha King of Valdren was seeking women for his household, not wives, not even proper servants. He needed someone to handle the beast, the legendary Nethris, the shadow wolf that had terrorized his kingdom for years, 7 handlers dead, dozens more maimed, and still the creature could not be controlled. Ziva stumbled out of the cart, her legs weak from days of cramped confinement. The courtyard was enormous, surrounded by stone walls that rose higher than any building she had ever seen. Nobles lined the balconies above, their silks bright against the gray sky. Guards stood in rigid formation, their hands resting on weapons that would do nothing against what lurked in the shadows. And then she felt it. A presence. Ancient. Savage. Broken. Her gift stirred inside her chest like a sleeping creature waking from hibernation. She had buried it for so long, but this was too powerful to ignore. Something was here, something in tremendous pain. A roar shattered the silence. The ground shook as a massive shape exploded from the shadows beneath the far archway. Black fur, eyes like burning embers, teeth as long as daggers. Nethris. The beast was even larger than the legends claimed, its shoulders as high as a man's head, its claws gouging trenches in the stone courtyard. And it was coming straight toward the line of captive women. Screams erupted. The women scattered, chains clanking as they tried to flee. Guards shouted orders that no one followed. A spear flew through the air and bounced uselessly off the wolf's flank. Ziva stood frozen. Not from fear, from recognition. And the beast's mind was a hurricane of anguish. She could feel it battering against her consciousness, centuries of rage and grief and desperate howling loneliness. This creature was not evil. It was wounded. Something had broken it long ago, and no one had ever tried to heal it. They had only tried to dominate it. Nethris was 20 feet away now. 15. 10. Ziva dropped to her knees. She heard gasps from the balconies above. Someone shouted at her to run, to move, to do anything but kneel in the mud like a lamb awaiting slaughter. But Ziva ignored them all. She pressed her palms flat against the cold earth, closed her eyes, and opened her mind. The beast's pain flooded into her. Images flashed. A mate torn away, cubs slaughtered, chains and whips and fire. Betrayal after betrayal after betrayal. Nethris had been hunted, captured, tortured into submission that never came. Every handler who raised a hand against it became another enemy. Every chain became another wound. I know, Ziva whispered, her voice barely audible. I know what it feels like to be broken by the people who should have protected you. The wolf's charge faltered. Ziva felt the exact moment when Nethris's fury cracked. Beneath the rage was something else, something starving, something that had not been touched with gentleness in 100 years. She reached for that part. She wrapped her consciousness around it like a warm blanket around frozen shoulders. I will not hurt you, she breathed. I promise. Nethris stopped. The courtyard went utterly silent. The massive wolf stood 3 feet away from Ziva, its hot breath washing over her face, its ember eyes boring into hers. For one endless moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, Nethris lowered its enormous head. The beast pressed its muzzle against Ziva's outstretched hands. Above, a collective gasp rippled through the watching nobles. Guards stared with slack jaws. The other captive women huddled together, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. And on the highest balcony, a figure in black stood motionless. Alpha King Castor had watched his kingdom's greatest terror kneel before a slave girl covered in mud and blood. He had watched the beast that had killed his finest warriors, that had resisted his own alpha command for 7 years, bow its head like a loyal hound. His pale, storm-colored eyes fixed on the woman in the courtyard. She was still kneeling, her hands buried in Nethris's dark fur, her body trembling. She looked half-starved, exhausted, and beaten down by whatever life had thrown at her. She looked like nothing. But she had done what no one else in his kingdom could do. Castor turned to his steward. Bring her to me. The steward hesitated. Your Majesty, she is a slave. We do not know where she came from. What crimes she... I said bring her to me. Castor's voice was quiet, but the command in it made the steward flinch. Now. As the guards moved toward the courtyard, Castor looked down at the kneeling woman one more time. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew she would be his. And he knew, with the cold certainty that had guided his every decision as king, that he would never allow himself to love her. The hallways of the Valdrin Palace seemed designed to make her feel small. Ziva walked between two guards, her bare feet silent on stone floors that had been polished to a mirror shine. Tapestries lined the walls, depicting battles and coronations and wolves running beneath blood-red moons. Every surface gleamed with wealth she could not comprehend, and every servant she passed stared at her with barely concealed horror. She was still covered in mud. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted, her wrists still bearing the raw marks of the slaver's ropes. She looked like something dragged from a gutter, not someone being escorted to an audience with the king. But then, she was something dragged from a gutter. The guards stopped before a massive wooden door carved with snarling wolves. One of them knocked twice, then pushed it open. "The king will see you now." Ziva's throat tightened as she stepped inside. The room was a study, though that word seemed inadequate for a space this grand. Books lined every wall, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. A fire burned in a hearth large enough to stand in, and despite the warmth it provided, Ziva felt cold the moment she crossed the threshold. Because he was there. Alpha King Castor stood by the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. He was tall, taller than any man she had ever seen, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders, and a stillness that seemed almost predatory. Even from behind, he radiated power. Not the brute dominance of common alphas who beat their chests and bared their teeth. This was something older, deeper, the kind of authority that did not need to announce itself. He turned. Ziva's breath caught. She had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. They said that Alpha King was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp and cold and dangerous to touch. They said noble women composed terrible poetry about his cheekbones, and princesses from distant kingdoms invented excuses to visit Valdrin just to see him. The rumors were insufficient. His face was carved marble given life, all sharp angles and elegant planes. His eyes were the color of frozen lakes, and when they fixed on her, Ziva felt as if she had been pinned in place by something ancient and merciless. She dropped into a curtsy, her knees nearly buckling. "Your Majesty." "Rise." His voice matched his appearance, cold, controlled, empty of anything resembling warmth. Ziva straightened, her pulse spiking so loud she was certain he could hear it. For a long moment, Castor simply looked at her. His gaze traveled from her muddy feet to her tangled hair, taking in every detail of her wretched appearance. She waited for the disgust, the dismissal, the order to throw her back in the slaver's cart. Instead, he said, "You touched my wolf." It was not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Nethris has killed 7 handlers, wounded 30 more. Resisted every form of training, every spell, every command." His head tilted slightly. "And you made it bow in under a minute." Ziva's mouth went dry. "I did not make it do anything, Your Majesty. I simply..." "Simply what?" She hesitated. The truth was dangerous. The truth was what had gotten her mother killed, what had gotten her sold into slavery. But lying to the king was also death. "I asked," she said finally, and it chose to listen. Something flickered in Castor's pale eyes. Not warmth, not interest. Something sharper. Calculation. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Ziva's hands trembled at her sides. "I am no one, Your Majesty. A slave. Less than nothing." "That is not what I asked." The fire crackled in the silence between them. Ziva could feel her gift stirring again, that treacherous awareness that made her feel the emotions of every creature nearby. She could sense the king's wolf beneath his skin, ancient and powerful and rigidly controlled. She could sense something else, too. a coldness at his core that seemed to radiate outward like frost spreading across glass. "I have a gift," she admitted, the words tasting like ash. "An ability to connect with beasts, to feel their minds, their pain, their needs. My mother had it before me." "Had?" Ziva met his eyes. "She was burned for witchcraft when I was 7. If she expected sympathy, she received none." Castor's expression did not change. He simply nodded once, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "I have a proposition for you," he said. Ziva's chest tightened. "Your Majesty?" Castor turned back to the window, looking out over the courtyard where Nethris still stood, and waiting. The wolf had not moved since she left. It was watching the doors she had disappeared through, as if afraid she would not return. "Nethris is bound to my bloodline," Castor said. "A pact made generations ago. The wolf's strength is my kingdom's strength. Its power is my power. But for 7 years I have been unable to command it. Unable to even approach it without risking death." He turned to face her again. "You calmed it with a touch. You reached it when nothing else could. I need that ability." Ziva stared at him. "You want me to be your beast keeper? I want you to be my wife." The word hung in the air like a blade suspended above her throat. Your Majesty, I do not understand." "It is quite simple." Castor's voice remained perfectly even. "You will marry me. You will become Queen of Valdrin. You will attend to Nethris and ensure the wolf remains calm and under control. In return, you will receive protection, comfort, titles, and wealth beyond anything you could imagine." Ziva's mind reeled. This was madness. She was a slave, a beast-touched outcast covered in mud and shame. Queens were princesses and noble daughters, women with dowries and bloodlines, and "There is one condition." She looked up at him. Castor's silver-gray gaze bore into hers. "This marriage will be in name only. You will have your own chambers, your own staff, and your own life entirely separate from mine. We will appear together at necessary functions, nothing more. I will never share your bed beyond what is necessary to produce heirs. I will never know you. I will never—" He paused, and for just a moment, something almost like pain flickered across his face. "I will never love you," he finished quietly. "Please understand that." Ziva should have been insulted. She should have been horrified or angry or confused beyond measure. Any normal woman would have demanded explanations, would have asked why a king would make such a cold offer to a slave he had known for all of 5 minutes. But Ziva was not any normal woman. She thought of her father's hatred. She thought of her sister's jealousy. She thought of the slaver's cart and the rope burns on her wrists, and the future that awaited her if she refused. Brothels, labor camps, a slow death in chains. And then she thought of the way Castor had looked at her when she knelt before Nethris, not with lust or cruelty or possessive hunger. With calculation, yes. With need. But also with something she had not expected. Respect. He had seen her covered in mud and blood, half-starved and broken, and he had still offered her a crown. "I accept," Ziva said. Castor blinked. For the first time, genuine surprise broke through his mask. "You do not wish to negotiate? To ask questions? To understand why? Would you answer them if I did?" A pause. "No." "Then I accept your terms, Your Majesty." Ziva lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with something she had not felt in years. Defiance. "Cold is better than cruelty. I will take indifference over hatred any day." Castor studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but she could sense his wolf stirring beneath his skin, intrigued by something it could not name. "You are strange," he said finally. "So I have been told, Your Majesty." "The wedding will take place in 3 days." He turned away, dismissing her. "My steward will see to your preparations." Ziva curtsied again and moved toward the door. But before she could leave, Castor spoke once more. "One more thing." She paused, her hand on the door frame. "Whatever secret you are hiding," he said quietly, "whatever shame drove your family to sell you into slavery, I have no interest in learning it. Your past is your own. I will not pry." He paused, and something flickered in his voice. "There are old stories in my family, enemies who envied our power, curses born from jealousy. Some secrets are best left buried." Ziva's throat tightened. It was not kindness. She knew that. It was indifference, pure and simple. He did not care enough to investigate. But still. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she whispered. And then she was gone, leaving the cold king alone with his fire and his wolves and his mysteries. She did not see the way his hand trembled as he gripped the windowsill. She did not hear him whisper, "What have I done?" The chambers they gave her were larger than her father's entire house. Ziva stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of it. A canopied bed dominated one wall, draped in silks the color of midnight. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking gardens that seemed to bloom despite the cold season. A bathing room larger than her childhood bedroom lay beyond an archway, steam already rising from a copper tub filled with rose-scented water. And standing before her were 6 servants, all of them watching with patient, empty eyes. Ziva frowned. "Your eyes. We are blind, Your Majesty." The eldest servant spoke with quiet dignity. "The king arranged for us specifically. He said you might prefer servants who could not see you." Ziva's breath caught. He had arranged blind servants. Before she even accepted his proposal. Before he even knew if she would agree. He had anticipated that she might want to hide, might want privacy, and might want to exist in this palace without being seen. It was such a small thing. It was everything. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you all." The servants bathed her gently, their hands careful and skilled. They washed away 3 days of mud and blood and despair, revealing skin that was pale and scarred in places she never let anyone see. They did not comment on the marks. They did not ask questions. They simply washed and dried and dressed her in soft fabrics that felt like clouds against her skin. By the time they finished, Ziva barely recognized herself. A mirror stood in the corner, tall and silver-framed. She approached it slowly, almost afraid of what she would find. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Her dark hair had been brushed until it gleamed. Her amber eyes, usually dull with exhaustion, seemed almost bright. The gown they had chosen was simple but elegant, a deep forest green that made her complexion glow. She looked almost beautiful. "No," she whispered, turning away. "Do not think such things." Beauty did not matter. Love did not matter. She was here for one purpose, to control Nethris, to be useful, to survive. A knock at the door made her jump. "Enter," she called. A steward appeared, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the king requests your presence in the council chamber. The marriage contract must be negotiated." Ziva's stomach dropped. "Now?" "Immediately, Your Majesty, your family has arrived." The walk to the council chamber felt like walking to her own execution. Ziva's pulse raced with every step, her mind spinning through possibilities. Her father was here. He had sold her into slavery 3 days ago, and now he stood in the same palace where she was about to become queen. The irony would have been delicious if she were not so terrified. The chamber doors opened and Ziva stepped inside. The room was enormous, dominated by a long table of dark wood. Windows lined the far wall, letting in pale morning light. Advisors sat along both sides, men in expensive robes with calculating eyes. At the head of the table sat the Alpha King. Castor wore black, as he had before, but today a silver crown rested on his dark hair. His expression was stone. And at the far end of the table, his face twisted with barely concealed fury, sat her father. Lord Gavric of House Vorn looked older than she remembered. Grayer. But the hatred in his eyes was exactly the same, Beside him sat her sister Saris, dressed in pale blue silk and looking everywhere except at Ziva. "Please sit," Castor said, gesturing to a chair near him. Ziva moved on wooden legs. She could feel her father's gaze burning into her back as she took her seat. "The marriage contract has been prepared according to His Majesty's specifications," an advisor began. "If we may review." "The terms are straightforward," Castor interrupted. He picked up a document, scanned it briefly, and then set it down. "Lady Ziva will become my queen. She will attend to the royal beast Nethris and ensure its continued cooperation with the crown. In return, she will receive all titles, lands, and protections afforded to a queen of Valdrin." Ziva's father surged forward. "Your Majesty, I must protest. This woman is dangerous. She carries a curse, a corruption of the blood that—" "I was not speaking to you." The words cut through the chamber like a blade. Castor did not raise his voice. He did not even look at Lord Gavrick, but the dismissal was absolute. "I was speaking to my future queen." An unfamiliar warmth bloomed in Ziva's chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. "Is this agreeable to you?" Castor asked, turning those eyes like frozen lakes toward her. Ziva met his gaze. "Yes, Your Majesty. It is more than agreeable." "Excellent." Castor slid the contract across the table. "Then sign." Lord Gavrick stood so abruptly his chair scraped against stone. "Your Majesty, you do not understand what you are binding yourself to. If you knew what she was, what she has done—" "I know what I need to know." "She is beast-touched," her father spat. "The same corruption that killed her mother, the same filthy magic that—" "Enough." This time, Castor did look at him. And something in that gaze made Lord Gavrick take a step back, his face going pale. "You sold your daughter into slavery," Castor said quietly. "You took money for her flesh and blood and freedom. And now you stand in my council chamber, questioning my choice of queen?" He leaned forward slightly. "Choose your next words very carefully, Lord Gavrick." Silence crashed over the room. Ziva watched her father's face cycle through fury, fear, and finally, defeat. His shoulders sagged. His hands dropped to his sides. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," he said through gritted teeth. "I spoke out of turn." "You did. Do not do so again." Castor returned his attention to Ziva. "Sign." She signed. Her father signed as witness, his hand shaking with rage he dared not express. The advisor signed, with their eyes flicking between the king and the mud-born woman he had inexplicably chosen. And then it was done. Ziva was going to be queen. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, advisors discussing logistics and ceremonies. Ziva slipped away as quickly as she could, desperate for air, for space, for a moment to process the fact that her entire life had just changed. She made it halfway down the corridor before a hand closed around her arm. "We need to talk." Karis's voice was sharp as glass. Her sister pulled her into an empty alcove, her beautiful face twisted with something between anger and desperation. "You cannot marry him." Ziva stared at her. "Why?" "Because when he discovers what you are, he will destroy you." Karis's grip tightened. "You think you have won something? You think this crown will protect you? He is the Alpha King. He has killed men for far less than what you are hiding." "I am hiding nothing." "Liar." Karis's voice cracked. "I was there that night, Ziva. I saw what you did. I saw the way those animals looked at you, the way they obeyed you without question. That is not normal. That is not natural." Ziva pulled her arm free. "What I did that night saved Father's horses, saved his stable hands, saved his entire breeding operation." "And exposed you for what you really are?" Saris leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Beast-touched, witch-blooded, monster." The word hit like a physical blow. "Mother was not a monster," Ziva whispered. "Mother burned for her crimes. And you will burn too, sister, the moment the king learns the full truth of what you can do." Karis stepped back, smoothing her silk gown. "I came here to warn you out of mercy. Do not mistake that for affection." She walked away without looking back. Ziva stood alone in the alcove, trembling. She should have felt angry. She should have felt defiant. But all she felt was the cold creeping back into her bones, the familiar weight of being hated by the people who should have loved her most. A soft sound made her turn. Nethris stood at the end of the corridor, watching her with those ember eyes. The massive wolf had somehow escaped its enclosure, had somehow found her in the labyrinthine palace. Its dark fur rippled as it padded closer, and courtiers scrambled to get out of its path. But it walked past them all without a glance. It walked directly to Ziva. And when she reached out her hand, still trembling from her sister's words, the great beast pressed its muzzle against her palm and made a sound she had never heard from any wolf before. A purr. She was not alone, she realized. She had never been alone. Above them, watching from the shadows of a balcony, Alpha King Castor observed the scene with an expression no one could read. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless, wanting something it could not name. And for the first time in 7 years, Castor felt something he had long believed impossible. He felt warmth. The morning of her wedding dawned gray and cold. Ziva stood before the tall mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. The blind servants had worked through the night, transforming her from a slaver's cast-off into something resembling a queen. Her gown was deep emerald silk embroidered with silver wolves running along the hem and sleeves. Her dark hair had been woven with tiny crystals that caught the light like captured stars. A delicate circlet rested on her brow, the first crown she had ever worn. She looked beautiful. She felt like a fraud. "Your Majesty." The eldest servant approached with a length of sheer fabric. "The king has sent this. He said you might wish to wear it." Ziva took the fabric with trembling fingers. It was a veil. Not heavy enough to fully obscure her features, but enough to soften them, to create a barrier between herself and the hundreds of eyes that would soon be watching her. He remembered, she thought. He knew I might want to hide. The cathedral bells began to toll. "It is time. Or your Majesty." The carriage ride through the city streets felt like a fever dream. Thousands of people lined the roads, pressing against barriers, craning their necks for a glimpse of their new queen. Ziva could hear their voices even through the carriage walls. "Is that her? The beast tamer? They say she walked right up to Nethris and touched it without fear. She must be a witch. No normal woman could do such a thing. Perhaps she has enchanted the king as well." Ziva's hands clenched in her lap. She had expected curiosity. She had expected suspicion. But the word witch cut deeper than she wanted to admit. The carriage stopped before the cathedral, and a footman opened the door. The noise hit her like a physical wave. Thousands of voices, all talking at once, all staring, all waiting to see what kind of woman had tamed the untamable beast and captured the attention of the cold king. Ziva stepped out onto the stone steps. The crowd's roar intensified, then shifted into something else. Murmurs, whispers, confusion. "She is veiled. Why can we not see her face properly? What is she hiding?" Ziva lifted her chin and walked toward the cathedral doors. She walked alone. No father to give her away. No family to stand beside her. Just her own 2 feet carrying her toward a future she could barely comprehend. The moment she crossed the threshold, the noise faded to a muffled hum. The cathedral was enormous, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow, its walls lined with stained glass windows depicting wolves and moons and ancient kings. Every pew was packed with nobility in their finest clothes, silks and velvets and jewels that glittered in the candlelight like scattered stars, and every single face turned toward her. Ziva kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, where the altar waited. Where he waited. Castor stood perfectly still, dressed entirely in black save for a silver sash across his chest. The crown on his head caught the candlelight, but it was nothing compared to the cold beauty of the man who wore it. He watched her approach with those storm-colored eyes, his expression revealing nothing. But as she drew closer, Ziva felt something unexpected. His wolf. She could sense it beneath his skin, ancient and powerful, but also restless, curious. It was watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with the controlled mask its master wore. The priest cleared his throat. We are gathered here today to witness the sacred union of Alpha King Castor of Valdrin and Lady Ziva of House Vorn. The ceremony passed in a blur of words and rituals. Ziva spoke her vows when prompted, her voice steadier than she expected. She felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her back, heard the whispers of the court wondering why the king had chosen this strange veiled woman over princesses and noble daughters. She did not care. All she could focus on was the man beside her. Do you, Castor, Alpha King of Valdrin, take this woman as your mate, your queen, your bond? I do. His voice was cold, formal, and empty of emotion, exactly as she expected. And yet, when the priest instructed them to exchange rings, Castor took her hand with unexpected gentleness. His fingers were cool against her skin, cooler than they should have been for an alpha wolf. But his touch was careful, almost reverent, as he slid the ring onto her finger. By the ancient laws of our kind, the priest continued, the bond must be spoken aloud. Speak your claim. Castor turned to face her fully. Through her veil, Ziva could see every detail of his face, the sharp cheekbones, the pale eyes, and the slight tension in his jaw that suggested this was harder for him than he let show. I claim you as mine, he said, his voice carrying through the cathedral. My wife, my queen, my bond. Ziva's wolf stirred inside her, responding to the words despite herself. She waited for the snap of a mate bond, the overwhelming connection the stories always described. It did not come. I claim you as mine, she echoed. My husband, my king, my bond. Still nothing. Just the faint stirring of potential, like embers waiting for breath. The priest smiled. The bond is spoken. You may now seal it with a kiss. The cathedral went utterly silent. Ziva could feel the anticipation in the air, thick as smoke. Everyone was waiting to see if the king would lift her veil, would finally reveal the face of the mysterious woman who had tamed his beast. Castor's hand rose toward her face. Blood rushed in Ziva's ears, but instead of reaching for her veil, his fingers caught her chin. Gently, so gently, he tilted her face upward. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. The kiss was brief, chaste, and almost tender, and he never touched her veil. Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers erupted like wildfire. He did not look at her. He kissed her forehead like a child. What is wrong with her face that even the king will not see it? But Ziva heard none of it. All she could feel was the cool press of his lips against her skin, the unexpected gentleness of a man who had sworn never to love her. Thank you, she whispered, so softly that only he could hear. Castor pulled back, his expression unreadable. But for just a moment, something flickered in those winter eyes. Something that might have been confusion, or wonder, or warmth. Then it was gone, and he was the cold king once more, turning to face the cheering crowd as if nothing had happened. But Ziva knew. Something had shifted between them. Something neither of them could name. The wedding feast passed in a haze of food and music and forced smiles. Ziva sat beside her new husband at the high table, accepting congratulations from nobles whose names she could not remember and whose eyes she did not trust. They all looked at her the same way, with curiosity and suspicion and barely concealed judgment. But none of them dared voice their doubts aloud. Not with the king beside her. As the night wore on, Ziva noticed something strange. Castor was cold. Not emotionally, though that too. Physically cold. Every time his arm brushed against hers, every time his fingers accidentally touched her hand, she felt it. A chill that seemed to radiate from his skin despite the warmth of the crowded hall. Alphas ran hot. Everyone knew that. Their wolf blood burned like fire in their veins. But Castor felt like winter given flesh. Your Majesty, An advisor appeared at the king's elbow. The hour grows late. Perhaps it is time for the queen to retire to her chambers. Castor nodded once. See that she is escorted safely. He did not look at her as he said it. He did not look at her as guards appeared to lead her away. He did not look at her at all. But as Ziva walked toward the doors, she glanced back over her shoulder, and she saw him watching her with those silver-gray eyes, his expression carefully blank, and his hands gripping the arms of his throne so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. Something is wrong with him, she realized. Something he is hiding. The doors closed behind her, and she was alone with her questions. The bridal chamber was warm. Too warm, Ziva thought as she sat on the edge of the massive bed, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. The blind servants had prepared her, bathing her in rose-scented water, brushing her hair until it shone, and dressing her in a nightgown of silk so thin it felt like wearing moonlight. Then they had left her alone, to wait. The contract had been clear. She would give him heirs. That was her purpose, her function, the price of her crown and her safety. She had agreed to those terms with open eyes. But now, sitting in this too-warm room with her pulse racing and her hands trembling, Ziva realized she had no idea what to expect. Would he be cold? Perfunctory? Would he treat this like a duty to be completed? A task to be checked off a list? Would he be cruel? She did not think so. She had seen nothing cruel in him. Cold, yes. Distant, yes, but not cruel. And yet, a soft knock at the door made her jump. Enter, she managed. The door opened and Castor stepped inside. He had changed from his wedding clothes. Gone was the crown, the silver sash, the elaborate jacket. He wore only a simple white shirt, unlaced at the throat, and dark trousers. His hair was loose around his shoulders, and in the firelight, he looked almost human, almost warm. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Castor reached into his pocket and withdrew a strip of black silk. I thought you might want this, he said quietly. Ziva stared at it. What is it? A blindfold. He held it out to her. For me, so that you need not worry about being seen, even in the darkness. A feeling she could not name cracked open inside her chest. He had brought a blindfold for himself. Not to control her, not to dominate her, but to protect her. To ensure her comfort even in this most vulnerable of moments. You would do that? She whispered. I gave you my word that I would not look upon you without your permission. Castor's voice was steady, emotionless. I intend to keep it. Ziva took the blindfold with trembling fingers. Turn around, she said softly. He obeyed without hesitation. She rose from the bed on unsteady legs and approached him. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control he maintained over every muscle. She could smell his scent, something deep and masculine beneath the winter sharpness. And she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. Her fingers brushed against his cheek as she lifted the blindfold, and he shivered. Not from cold, from something else. You are warm, he murmured, sounding almost surprised. All wolves are warm, she replied, tying the silk carefully around his eyes. Except, it seems, for you. He said nothing. She stepped back, studying him in the firelight. The blindfold covered the upper half of his face, leaving only his jaw and mouth visible. He looked vulnerable like this, almost gentle. The candles, she said. Should I? If you wish. Ziva moved through the room, extinguishing each flame until only the fire in the hearth remained, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Then she returned to stand before him. Complete darkness would come later. For now, she wanted to see his face. Just for a moment. I am going to touch you, she said quietly. Is that all right? A slight hitch in his breathing. Yes. She reached out and pressed her palm flat against his chest. The cold hit her immediately, seeping through the thin fabric of his shirt. But beneath it, she felt his heart beating fast and strong, faster than his controlled demeanor suggested. "You are like ice," she whispered. "A family condition," he said, the words clipped. "It is nothing." But she could feel the lie in the tension of his muscles, in the way his wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin. There was something wrong with him, something deeper than a mere condition. Before she could pursue the thought, Castor's hands rose slowly in the darkness. "May I?" he asked. Ziva's chest tightened with anticipation. "Yes." His palm settled on her shoulders with exquisite care. Large hands, cool hands, but gentle in a way she had not expected from a man who commanded armies and ruled kingdoms. For a long moment, he simply held her like that. Then his thumbs began to trace small circles against her skin, and Ziva felt herself relax into the touch. He was being careful with her, treating her as if she were something precious, something that might shatter if handled too roughly. No one had ever touched her like this. His fingers found the thin straps of her nightgown. He paused, a question in the stillness. "Yes," Ziva breathed. He slid the straps down with aching slowness. The silk whispered against her skin as it fell, pooling at her feet like liquid moonlight. Cool air washed over her bare skin, and she shivered. "Cold?" Castor asked quietly. "No, just—" She did not know how to finish the sentence. Nervous, terrified, wanting something she could not name. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer. The contrast was immediate and overwhelming. His skin was cool where hers was warm, his body solid and powerful where hers was soft and trembling. When his mouth found her neck, Ziva made a sound she did not recognize. "Tell me if I should stop," he murmured against her skin. "Do not stop." He did not stop. His mouth worked its way down her neck, along her collarbone, learning the shape of her with lips and tongue and the occasional careful graze of teeth. Every touch sent sparks racing through her body, building into something she had never felt before. When he lifted her, her legs wrapped around his waist instinctively. He carried her to the bed with sure steps despite his blindfold, laying her down with such care that she might have been made of glass. Then he was above her, and the weight of him was both terrifying and perfect. "Ziva," he said. Again, it was the first time he had spoken her name. "Are you certain?" No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever cared what she wanted. "Yes," she whispered. "I am certain." What followed was slow and careful and nothing like she had imagined. He was gentle with her, patient. He paid attention to every sound she made, every shift of her body, adjusting his movements to ensure her comfort. When there was pain, he stopped immediately, murmuring soothing words until she relaxed. And when they finally came together fully, Ziva understood what it meant to be connected to another person. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, both breathing hard. His arm was wrapped around her, holding her close against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, could feel the cold of his skin slowly warming from contact with hers. "You are so warm," he said again, and this time there was wonder in his voice. I had forgotten what warmth felt like. Ziva turned in his arms, pressing her palm against his heart. "Why are you so cold?" Silence. "Castor," she pressed gently. "Please." His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "It is not something I speak of. Will you ever tell me?" A pause. Then, very quietly, "Perhaps. One day." It was not an answer, but it was not a refusal either. She felt him begin to pull away, heard him reaching for his clothes in the darkness. "Must you go?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Castor paused. "I thought you would prefer privacy." Ziva hesitated. She should want privacy. She should want space, distance, the safety of solitude. That was what she had always wanted. But not now. Not with him. "Stay," she whispered. "Just for tonight." Another pause, longer this time. Then she felt him settle back beside her, his arm coming around her waist once more. His chest pressed against her back, cool and solid and somehow reassuring. Just for tonight, he agreed quietly. But he did not leave. And when Ziva woke in the gray light of dawn, he was still there, his blindfold still in place, his arms still wrapped around her as if she were something precious he was afraid to lose. She watched him sleep, studying the parts of his face she could see, the strong jaw, the full lips, the tiny scar at the corner of his mouth she had not noticed before, and she felt something dangerous blooming in her chest, something she knew she should not feel, something she could not stop. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And every night, and without fail, Castor came to her chambers. At first, Ziva told herself it was purely functional. The contract required heirs, and heirs required effort. He was simply fulfilling his duty, nothing more. But duty did not explain the way he lingered afterward. The way his hands traced patterns on her skin when he thought she was asleep. The way he whispered her name like a prayer in the darkness. Duty did not explain the conversations. They talked about everything. Politics, philosophy, the histories of their respective houses. He asked her about Nethris, about how her gift worked, about what it felt like to touch the mind of a wild creature. She asked him about his kingdom, his burdens, the weight of a crown he had worn since childhood. He never removed the blindfold. She never asked him to. But she learned him anyway. She learned the sound of his laugh, rare and rusty from disuse. She learned the particular sigh he made when she touched him just right. She learned the way his wolf stirred beneath his skin when she was near, restless and wanting in ways Castor himself seemed not to understand. And she learned that she was falling in love with him. It crept up on her slowly, like dawn breaking over the mountains. One morning she woke and realized she craved the sound of his voice. She counted the hours until he would appear at her door. She lay awake at night listening to him breathe, memorizing the rhythm of it. She was in love with her husband who had sworn never to love her back. Ziva tried to bury the feeling. She threw herself into her duties, spending hours each day with Nethris in the courtyard. The great wolf had become her constant shadow, following her everywhere, sleeping outside her chambers at night. The beast that had killed 7 handlers now purred like a kitten when she scratched behind its ears. But even Nethris could not distract her from the truth. She wanted more. She wanted him to stay through the night without being asked. She wanted him to hold her in the daylight, not just the darkness. She wanted him to look at her, truly look at her, and see something worth loving. 3 months after the wedding, Ziva sought advice. Lady Mirabelle was the king's aunt, an elegant widow who had served as unofficial advisor to 3 generations of rulers. She received Ziva in her private salon with a knowing smile. "You wish to know how to make him stay," she said, before Ziva could speak. Ziva blinked. "How did you—" "I have eyes, child." Mirabelle gestured for her to sit. "And I have watched my nephew these past months. He is different with you. Softer. Almost warm." She paused meaningfully. "Almost?" "He comes to me every night," Ziva admitted, her cheeks burning. "But he always leaves before dawn. He never stays. He never lets himself be vulnerable," Mirabelle finished. "That is the burden of the men in this family. They believe love is weakness. They believe cold is strength." "Is there a reason?" Ziva asked carefully. "For the cold, I mean. He feels like ice, even when—" Mirabelle's expression flickered. "There are old stories, shadows in our family's past, but those are not mine to tell." She leaned forward. "What matters is this. You love him." It was not a question. "Yes," Ziva whispered. "I know I should not." I know he said he would never." "Men say many things," Mirabelle interrupted. "What they do is what matters. And what Castor does is come to you every night, despite swearing he wanted nothing to do with you. What he does is bring you blindfolds and blind servants and every comfort you might desire. What he does is look at you when he thinks no one is watching, and the look on his face? She trailed off, shaking her head. What? Ziva pressed. What look? Hunger, Miravel said simply, and fear. He looks at you like a starving man looks at bread, terrified that if he reaches for it, it will disappear. That night, Ziva changed her approach. When Castor arrived at her chambers, she did not wait passively on the bed. She met him at the door, pulling him inside before he could speak. Ziva, he started, surprised. She silenced him with her mouth. The kiss was different than before. Not gentle, not patient. Desperate, hungry. She poured everything she felt into it, all the wanting and hoping and terrifying love she could not name. And he responded. His hands tangled in her hair. His body pressed her back against the wall. A sound escaped him, something between a growl and a groan, and it sent fire racing through her veins. They barely made it to the bed. Afterward, they lay tangled together, both spent and peaceful. Castor's blindfold had gone askew during their exertions, but his eyes remained closed. Stay, Ziva whispered, pressing closer to him. Stay with me tonight. I always stay. Stay until dawn, stay until the sun rises, stay until the servants come knocking. He was quiet for a long moment. Then his arm tightened around her. All right. She did not let him go. And when morning came, he was still there, still holding her, his face peaceful in sleep. Ziva watched him, her heart full to bursting with things she could not say. The weeks that followed were the happiest of her life. Castor came earlier each evening. Sometimes he arrived before dinner, eating with her in her chambers before taking her to bed. Sometimes they did not bother with dinner at all. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He shared his frustrations with the council, his fears for the kingdom, and his hopes for the future. She shared her dreams, her memories, and her gift with beasts that had once been her greatest shame and had now become her greatest purpose. He laughed more now, smiled more. The cold in his eyes seemed to thaw whenever he looked at her. But the cold in his skin remained. Ziva tried not to notice, tried not to worry. But every night she woke to find him shivering despite the warm blankets. Every morning his skin was paler than it should be, his lips faintly blue. She added logs to the fire. She wrapped him in extra furs. She pressed her warmth against him until his shivers eased, but the cold always returned. Castor, she said one night, as they lay together in the darkness, please tell me what is wrong. His body went rigid. Nothing is wrong. You are freezing. Every night you shake with cold. You feel like ice beneath my hands. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat slow and sluggish. This is not normal. This is not a mere family condition. Silence stretched between them. Please, she whispered. I cannot help you if I do not understand. For a long moment he did not respond. Then, very quietly, later, I will tell you later. She let it go. But the worry remained, a constant companion in the back of her mind. 2 weeks later, Ziva discovered she was pregnant. The healer confirmed it in the early morning, beaming as if she had delivered the greatest gift in the world. Ziva sat in stunned silence, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach. A child. She was carrying Castor's child. That evening, she waited until they lay together in the darkness, both spent and peaceful, before she told him. I am with child. He went completely still. Then his hand found her stomach in the darkness, pressing flat against her skin. You are certain? His voice was strange, thick with something she could not identify. The healer confirmed it this morning. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then, a child. We are having a child. And for the first time since she had known him, Ziva heard pure, unguarded joy in his voice. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He buried his face in her hair, and she felt the impossible wetness against her neck. Tears. The cold king was weeping with happiness. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Ziva. Thank you." She held him as he trembled against her, and a dangerous hope expanded inside her until it felt like it might burst. "He loves this child already," she realized. "He will love our baby. But will he ever love me?" The fear rose up, black and choking. He had what he wanted now. An heir. The purpose of their marriage fulfilled. Why would he keep coming when the contract was complete? Before she could stop herself, the tears began to fall. "Ziva?" Castor's voice sharpened with concern. "What is wrong? Are you in pain?" "You are going to leave," she choked out. "You have what you need now. An heir. You said you would never love me. You said once I gave you children, we would have nothing more to do with each other." "What?" He sounded horrified. "No. No, Ziva. That is not. I love you." The words tore out of her like a confession. "I know I should not. I know you said you would never feel the same, but I love you, Castor. I love you, and I cannot bear to lose you." Silence. Her chest ached in the darkness. Then his hands were on her face, cupping her cheeks, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You love me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Truly?" "Yes, and I have tried not to, but I cannot help." "Ziva." His voice broke on her name. "I have been a fool, such a fool. I thought I could keep my heart closed. I thought I could have you without. His breathing hitched, his grip on her face tightened. "I love you," he said. "Gods help me. I love you too. I have loved you since the moment you knelt in the mud and made my beast bow. I have loved you every night I have held you in the darkness. I have loved you more than I have ever loved anything in my entire—" He stopped. His whole body went rigid. "Castor?" Ziva's voice sharpened with fear. "Castor, what is wrong?" A horrible choking sound escaped him. His hands fell from her face. His body convulsed. "No," he gasped. "No, not now. Not when I finally—" He collapsed. "Castor!" Ziva screamed his name as he crumpled beside her. His skin, always cold, turned to ice beneath her hands. Frost began to spread across his chest, visible even in the darkness, crystallizing on his skin like deadly lace. His eyes rolled back. His breath came in shallow gasps, and Ziva realized with dawning horror that the man she loved was dying in her arms. "Someone help me! The king is dying!" Ziva's screams echoed through the palace as she cradled Castor's frozen body. Servants came running, guards burst through the doors, but she barely saw them. All she could see was the frost spreading across his chest like a living thing, crystallizing over his heart, turning his skin the color of death. "Get the healers!" she screamed. "Get everyone! Now!" The next hours passed in a nightmare blur. Healers came and went, their faces growing graver with each examination, and they tried warming stones, hot compresses, even heating spells from the court's minor magic practitioners. Nothing worked. The ice continued to spread, creeping up his neck, down his arms, turning the Alpha King into a frozen statue of the man he had been. "We do not understand it," the chief healer admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. "His body temperature keeps dropping no matter what we do. It is as if something is consuming his warmth from the inside." "Then find out what it is." Ziva's voice cracked. "He cannot die. He cannot." "Your Majesty." Lady Mirabelle appeared at her side, her elegant face pale with fear. "There is something you must know." Ziva turned to her, desperate. "What? What is it?" Mirabelle glanced at the healers, at the servants, at the guards lining the walls. "In private. Please." They retreated to a small antechamber, leaving Castor in the care of the healers. Ziva's hands would not stop shaking. "Tell me," she demanded. "Tell me what is happening to him." Mirabelle's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her weathered cheeks. "It is the curse," she whispered. "The curse on the kings of Valdrin. It has finally claimed him." Ziva's blood turned to ice in her veins. What curse? What are you talking about? Generations ago, our ancestor King Aldrich sought power beyond what any Alpha had ever possessed. He found a way to bind his bloodline to Nethris, the Shadow Wolf, an ancient creature of immense magical strength. The binding gave the kings of Valdrin unmatched power, but there was a price. Miravel's voice dropped to barely a whisper. A rival sorceress named Valthera learned of the binding. She was furious that Aldrich had gained such power without her blessing, so she twisted the bond. She decreed that the kings of Valdrin would never know love. Their hearts would belong only to the wolf, to power, to cold ambition. If they ever fell in love with another, the ice would consume them. Ziva finished, horror dawning. That is why he is always so cold. That is why he swore he would never love me. He was trying to protect himself. Miravel gripped her hands. He chose you because he thought he could never love a woman he could not see. He thought the distance would keep his heart safe. But it did not. No. Miravel's voice broke. He fell in love with you anyway, and now the curse is killing him. Ziva's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her mind reeling. He had known. All this time, he had known that loving her would mean his death. And he had fallen anyway. He had held her in the darkness, whispered her name like a prayer, made love to her with such devastating tenderness, all while knowing what it would cost him. How do we break it? Ziva demanded. There must be a way. Every curse has a counter. If there is one, I do not know it. Our family has searched for generations. Miravel shook her head. The sorceress who cast the curse died long ago. Her knowledge died with her. Then I will find another way. Ziva rose on unsteady legs. Her mind was racing, pieces clicking together. The curse was tied to Nethris. Castor could not love because his bond belonged to the wolf. But Ziva had bonded with Nethris too. She had touched the creature's mind, felt its pain, and earned its loyalty. What if that connection was the key? I need to see the wolf, she said, now. Nethris was waiting in the courtyard as if it had sensed her coming. The great beast paced restlessly, its ember eyes fixed on the palace windows where its master lay dying. When Ziva approached, it let out a sound she had never heard before. A whine, high and keening and full of grief. You feel it too, she whispered, pressing her hands against its massive face. You feel him fading. The wolf's mind brushed against hers, and images flooded through. Centuries of memories, kings rising and falling, each one cold, distant, incapable of love, each one bound to the wolf and to nothing else, until now, until her. Ziva saw herself through the wolf's eyes, a small figure in the mud, reaching out when everyone else had tried to dominate. A warm presence in a world of ice, a bridge between the beast and the man, and she understood. I can save him, she breathed. My bond with you, my gift, it can break the curse. I can give him the warmth he needs. But even as hope surged through her, she felt the wolf's hesitation, its fear. There was something else, something she needed to know first. The wolf's mind pressed deeper into hers and she saw it. A memory not from the wolf, but from her own buried past. A memory she had locked away so deeply that she had almost forgotten it existed. The night her mother died. Fire, screaming, and a 7-year-old girl reaching out with her gift, trying to save her mother from the flames. But instead of helping, the connection had gone wrong. Her power had surged out of control. The animals in the nearby barn had panicked, stampeding, knocking over lanterns, spreading the fire faster. Her mother had burned because of her gift. Ziva gasped, stumbling backward. No, she choked. No, I did not. I could not have. But the memory was clear now, searing and undeniable. She had tried to save her mother and had killed her instead. Her gift was not a blessing. It was a curse. A monster lurking inside her, waiting to destroy everyone she loved, just like it was destroying Castor now. I cannot. She was sobbing, her whole body shaking. I am the reason people die. My mother. And now Castor. Everyone I love, I destroy. The wolf pressed its muzzle against her chest, and suddenly she felt it. Not her own memory, but the wolf's correction. The truth her trauma had hidden from her. The fire that killed her mother had not started because of her panicked gift. It had started deliberately. Someone had set that fire. Someone had trapped her mother inside and lit the blaze, while a 7-year-old girl scrambled desperately to save her. Someone had murdered her mother and let a child believe it was her fault. Ziva's grief transformed into something harder. Colder. Sharper. Who? She demanded. Who did this? The wolf showed her. A man standing in the shadows watching the fire burn. A man with cold eyes and a satisfied smile. A man who had called her beast-touched, cursed, monstrous for her entire life. Her father. Ziva ran. She ran through the palace corridors, past startled servants and confused guards, until she burst into the chamber where Castor lay. He was worse. The frost had spread to cover most of his body. His lips were blue. His breathing was shallow, barely visible. The healers had stepped back, their expressions hopeless. Everyone out, Ziva commanded. Now! They obeyed without question. Something in her voice brooked no argument. When they were alone, Ziva climbed onto the bed beside her husband. She pulled his frozen body into her arms, pressing her warmth against his ice. Castor, she whispered. Castor, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open. Silver gray and fading, but still fighting. Ziva. Her name emerged as barely a breath. I am sorry. I should have told you. About the curse? I thought I could resist it. A ghost of a smile crossed his frozen lips. I thought if I never looked at you, never knew you, I could keep my heart safe. But you, his voice cracked. You made me feel alive for the first time. You made me remember what warmth was. Do not speak, Ziva begged. Save your strength. There is no strength left to save. His hand, cold as death, found hers. I love you, Ziva. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid, and I was a coward, and I wasted so much time. You are not dying. Her voice was fierce. I will not let you die. There is no cure. There is. She gripped his face between her hands, forcing him to look at her. My gift. My bond with Nethris. I can save you, but you have to trust me. His fading eyes focused on her face. Really focused, for the first time without the blindfold between them. And she watched his expression change. You are beautiful, he breathed. Castor. I always wondered. His frozen fingers traced her cheek. What your face looked like. I imagined it 1,000 times in the darkness. But I never imagined this. Ziva caught his hand, pressing her lips to his palm. You need to know something first, before I try to save you. There is something about me, about my gift that you might hate. I could never hate you. You do not know what I am. She took a shuddering breath. I thought for years that I killed my mother. My gift went wrong, and I believed I caused the fire that burned her alive. I have carried that guilt my entire life. Castor's eyes widened. Tonight, Nethris showed me the truth. It was not my fault. My father set that fire. He murdered my mother and let me believe I was responsible. Her voice hardened. He sold me into slavery hoping Nethris would kill me. When I survived, when I married you, he hoped the curse would finish what the wolf could not. Silence filled the chamber. Then Castor's hand tightened on hers with surprising strength. I will kill him, he said quietly. When I survive this, I will tear him apart with my bare hands. You believe me? I believe you. His gray eyes burned with certainty despite the ice claiming his body. I have always believed you. From the moment you knelt in the mud and reached for a monster, I knew you were not capable of cruelty. You see pain, and you heal it. That is who you are. Tears streamed down Ziva's face. How can you love me? I am beast-touched. I am broken. I am... You are mine. His voice was fading, but the conviction in it remained. My wife. My queen. My heart. And I love you more now than I did before you told me. I will love you until the ice takes me completely. The frost crept higher, crawling up his throat. His eyes began to close. No. Ziva pressed her forehead against his. No, you will not leave me. Not now. Not when I finally have you. She closed her eyes and reached for her gift. The power surged up from somewhere deep inside her, stronger than it had ever been. She felt Nethris outside, felt the ancient wolf add its strength to hers. She felt the bond between them, a three-way connection linking woman and wolf and king. And she pushed. All her warmth, all her love, all the fire that had burned inside her since childhood, suppressed and feared and hidden away. She gave it to him. The ice began to melt. Ziva felt it happening, felt the frost receding beneath her palms, felt warmth flooding back into Castor's frozen veins. But the effort was enormous. Every ounce of heat she gave him drained from her own body. She was killing herself to save him, and she did not care. More, she gasped. I need more. Nethris howled outside, and suddenly the wolf was there. Not physically, but mentally, its presence filling the room like a second heartbeat. The ancient creature was giving its own strength to the bond, channeling centuries of power through Ziva and into the dying king. The frost shattered. Castor's body arched off the bed as warmth slammed back into him. Color flooded his cheeks. His eyes flew open, clear and bright and alive. Ziva. She collapsed against him, completely spent. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They simply breathed together, hearts pounding in sync, alive against all odds. Then Castor's arms wrapped around her with crushing strength. You saved me. His voice was hoarse with disbelief. You actually saved me. I told you I would. She managed a weak smile. Did you doubt me? Never. He pressed kisses to her hair, her forehead, her cheeks. Never again. I will never doubt you again. Outside, Nethris howled once more, but this time it was not a sound of grief. It was triumph. The following weeks passed in a blur of revelations and justice. Ziva told Castor everything, about her father's crimes, about her mother's murder, about the years of abuse and blame, and finally the sale into slavery. Castor listened in cold silence, and when she finished, he summoned the royal guard. Lord Gavric was arrested that very night. He denied everything, of course, screamed about conspiracies and ungrateful daughters and beast-touched witches who had enchanted the king. But evidence mounted quickly. Servants came forward, records were discovered, and finally, damning testimony from an unexpected source. Saris, Ziva's sister, appeared before the council, pale but determined. I did not know everything, she admitted, her voice shaking. But I knew enough to suspect. Father always hated Ziva, always blamed her for things that made no sense. When our mother died, he seemed almost relieved. She looked at Ziva, her eyes swimming with tears. I should have questioned it sooner. I should have protected you instead of hating you. I was jealous and foolish, and I believed his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. Ziva reached out and took her sister's hand. We both believed his lies, she said quietly. That ends now. Lord Gavric was convicted of murder, conspiracy, and treason against the crown. He was stripped of his titles, his lands, and his name. He would spend the rest of his life in the deepest dungeon beneath the palace, forgotten and alone. Garrus was offered a place at court. She accepted hesitantly, still carrying the weight of guilt for years of cruelty toward her sister. But slowly, day by day, the two women began to rebuild what their father had destroyed. And through it all, Castor remained at Ziva's side. The curse was broken completely. Not just for him, but for the entire bloodline. Whatever Ziva had done when she pushed her warmth into him, it had shattered the ancient spell at its root. Future generations of Valdrin would be free to love without fear, including their child. 7 months later, Ziva gave birth to a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Aldrich, after the king who had first bound their family to Nethris. But this Aldrich would be different. This Aldrich would know love from his first breath. Castor wept when he held his son for the first time. Ziva watched them together, her heart so full it ached. The cold king who had sworn never to love was cradling his newborn child with tears streaming down his face, his whole body radiating warmth. "He has your nose," Castor said, laughing through his tears. "Poor boy." "He has your stubbornness," Ziva replied. "He refused to come out for 3 extra hours just to spite the midwife." Castor pressed a kiss to his son's tiny forehead, then turned to Ziva. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. For saving me. For loving me. For giving me this." "You saved me too," she reminded him. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. You gave me respect when I had known only contempt. You gave me love when I had forgotten it existed." "We saved each other," he agreed. Nethris appeared in the doorway, somehow having squeezed its massive form through the palace corridors. The great wolf padded over to the bed and peered down at the baby with its ember eyes. Little Aldrich gurgled and reached up toward the beast. Nethris lowered its head and gently, so gently, pressed its nose against the child's tiny palm. A bond formed. Ziva felt it happen. Not the harsh, cold binding of the old curse, but something new, something warm. A connection built on love rather than domination. "He will be a great king," she said softly, "and he will never be alone." That night, after the celebrations had ended and the palace had fallen quiet, Ziva stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. The moon was full, casting silver light over everything. Nethris dozed in the courtyard below, and somewhere in the nursery, their son slept peacefully in his cradle. Castor came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her hair. "Everything." She leaned back against him, feeling the warmth that now radiated from his skin. "The auction, the mud, the moment I thought I would die beneath your beast's claws. And instead, you tamed it. I did not tame it. I understood it." She turned in his arms to face him. "Just like I understand you." Castor cupped her face in his hands, warm hands now, living hands. "I spent my whole life believing I was cursed to be cold," he said quietly. "To be alone, to rule without love and die without warmth. And then you knelt in the mud, covered in blood and chains, and you showed me that everything I believed was wrong." "We were both hiding," Ziva whispered. "Both convinced we were monsters. Both certain we did not deserve love. We found it anyway." "We did." He kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise. Not the careful, controlled kisses of their early days, but something fiercer, something that spoke of forever. When they finally parted, Ziva smiled up at him. "No more blindfolds," she said. "No more darkness. No more hiding." "No more hiding," he agreed. "From this moment forward, we face everything together. In the light." She took his hand and led him back inside. Behind them, Nethris raised its great head and howled at the moon. Not a sound of pain or rage, but of joy, of belonging, of a pack finally made whole. The beast that had never bowed to anyone had bowed to her. And in doing so, it had given her everything. A home, a family, a love that had broken the oldest curse in the kingdom, and a future brighter than she had ever dared to dream. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and would like to support the channel, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and they mean more than you know. Until next time.